So let's actually use search term, right? Right now we're not really doing anything with it. I just wanted to show you that if we replace this .state.search term here inside of the h1, and then we come back over here to our nice little thing right here. Notice that we have nothing right there, and then as soon as I start typing, it's echoed over here, right? So this data is bound to this one, so whatever is in the input is also going to be input over there, right? So this kind of bends back to what I was talking about earlier. You have to think of React components in terms of, given a certain set of state and a certain set of props, this is what it's going to look like, right? So you think about React in terms of snapshots, right? Given this snapshot of props and this snapshot of state, my React component is always going to look like this. It's deterministically going to look like this, right? Every single time given this state and given this props, it's always going to look this way. Now, what's advantageous about thinking about your component in this particular light is you get to eliminate the axes of time, right? So I'm sure many of you have debugged a problem with like jQuery or Angular or something like that, where you have, I had to click this button and this button and then this button and then this broke over here, right? So you had to go through like these series of just like weirdness to get to eventually this state, right? You have to think about events over time leading to this particular problem, right? With React components, it's just really, given this state, this breaks, right? And I feel like that's a much more simple thing to think about, because you no longer have to think about going through periods of time to arrive at this single point, right? It's just, if I put this state into this component, it just breaks, or it doesn't break, right? So yes, that's what I wanted to demonstrate to you here, that given this state, right, where this state, it's going to look like this, right? So when the state looks like this, that component is always going to look like that. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay, so
there's a few minor
sure.
questions in chat. Amir's asking, could you recap why the file names are JSX instead of JS? In version 2, they were all JS.
The answer to that question is, in version 2, they were all JS because that's where it seemed like things were going with Create React App. Create React App enforces .js, and then we switched to the Airbnb style rules, which enforces JSX. And version 1 was JSX as well. So in other words, no one's really decided yet where it's going to be, and I just went with what Airbnb decided, because so yeah, that's why it is because the Airbnb rules enforce that.
And could you recap the trade-off of using the constructor versus not?
I just think this is more succinct, right? If you use the constructor method, that's valid ES6 today, and this is using a stage 2 proposal. So I like this better because I find it easier to read. The other reason why it's going to be beneficial is because when we get into flow types, flow can understand this better, which we will talk about that when we get to flow.
Would we have to use a constructor if this component was accessing props?
Nope. So I see what you're saying, because you have to call super props inside of the constructor. So you're overriding the React constructor if you write your own constructor. So the default React constructor will take care of the props for you. Good question. Any more? Cool. So it's probably the last thing we'll do today. Let's talk about, or let's actually use search term rather than just being something cute that displays at the top. What I want to do is, given some search term, so if I type black, right, I only want black mirror to show up, right? So I want to be able to search in real time my various shows that I have up here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do something a little clever. So we have preload.shows, right? And we're using that to map out to a set of components. So if I want to show less components, I can do a little bit more functional foo, and I can just filter before I map, right? So I can just filter out the ones I don't want based on that search term, and then only display the ones that I want. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say before I call .map, I'm going to call .filter. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pass in a show. So with filter, if I return true for any given item, it's going to keep it in the array. And if I return false, it's going to take it out of the array. So if I did false right here, right, I would get nothing, right? If I put true here, I would get everything, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to check to see if the search term exists in either the title or the description, right? So I want to know, are you in the title, so show.title, or the show.description, show.description. And then I'm going to say, yeah, I think this is the best way to do it. Whatever. I want to be case insensitive, right? So I'm going to say to uppercase dot index of. So I'm going to check if it exists anywhere in the string. That's going to be this dot state dot search term, right? So I'm going to check if this dot search term exists inside of the show, which I'm also going to put to uppercase, right? Because I want to make this thing totally case insensitive. And then I'm just going to check to see if it's greater than or equal to 0. Oops, that should be a dot. This is a little dense. You could pull this out if this made you feel better. But let's just kind of recap here, right? So filter, right? We're doing a filter on this. This, I'm putting show title and show description in one string together, right? So I can check both the description and the title. I could put it in either order, it doesn't really matter. Okay, I'm putting them to uppercase because I want to take case sensitivity out of the question. I'm then asking, in this uppercase string right here, can you find search term also in uppercase, right? Because index of is going to give you somewhere, if it's greater than or equal to 0, it exists in the string, and if it doesn't exist in the string, it's going to return -1, right? So true if it's in the string, or false if it's not in the string, right? And that's what we're going to be filtering on. How do we feel about that? It's a little dense, but this is a good way of hacking at search, right? This isn't exactly Elasticsearch. I think their algorithm's a little bit more sophisticated, but this will do the job for what we're doing. So now if I type black, it's only going to show Black Mirror and Orange is the New Black, right? If I type house, it's going to type House of Cards. Or game, I get Game of Thrones. Come on, that's pretty cool, right? Pretty cool? Pretty cool. Yes. So this is what I'm getting at, and what I keep harping on is, given this state and given these props, this is what this component looks like, right? So with the snapshot that, I can even, here's a good way of doing it, right? So we can set the default state. So if I put game right here and I save it, what's going to be rendered on first render? Just Game of Thrones, right? So given that snapshot where the search term is game, then it's going to be only showing Game of Thrones, and then as soon as I delete it, I get everything back. Does that make sense? So this is it only took me 6 goddamn hours, but we eventually got to the point of why I think React is amazing, right? Because I think this is a really powerful, intuitive, and performant way of writing JavaScript. I think it's a way to write scalable apps. And the interesting thing is, you can come back later and, barring this, I'd probably abstract this out into some sort of module or something actually a little bit more robust. But barring this little mess right here, this is actually pretty easy to read through, right? It's pretty intuitive that given this state, you get this sort of output. I find it easy to use the term de jure, reason about, right? Any questions? Yeah, this is one of the things that just really made me realize, like, this is great. I want to keep writing this. Someone pointed out to me the other day that the posters are of uneven size, and now I can't unsee it.
Do you push?
Yeah, definitely.
There's a few people who are missing something along the way, so.
Easy to do. I mean, we're writing a pretty big app together, so.
Yeah. I love how many people have written into us how, like, this course gave them a job, right? Because it's, like, so real world that people got, now know how to build a React, like, production app, and they're like, I got this job because of it, right?
It's super rewarding. So I was at a user group, the Modern Web Meetup group in San Jose last week. Some guy, I was on the phone. It was a little rude, but it was pretty cool too. He walks up to me and says, "Hey, I got a job at Facebook because of your course," and then just ran off. So I was like, "Thank you," or "You're welcome," or "Damn it," I don't know. I was both offended and bewildered and honored all at the same time. So more honored. It was super cool. No, it's awesome to hear that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but the whole point of that is just, like, software development is hard, right? This stuff, building a real world application is difficult. There's a lot of moving pieces, and
For sure.
you're sort of demystifying each piece, and especially with the videos, people can kind of come back to it and all that.
For sure.
But it is daunting because it is hard, and that's why people get paid a lot of money to write this kind of stuff.
For sure. For sure. And that's why this class is structured the way it is. I like exercises that I leave for you to do on your own and, like, connect the dots yourself. But that's more useful for, I feel like, algorithms and, like, little bite-sized pieces, right? We're talking about modern application development, and that's not an exercise. It's like, okay, build a Netflix app, go, and I'm just going to sit over here, right? That doesn't work, right? Like, we need to sit down together and build things, and it's useful for you to type things even if you don't understand them, because at least for me, the act of typing something, like, helps me connect dots in my brain, right? And especially, like, I put all the pieces together and then I step back. It's like, oh, okay, now I see that it was a puzzle. That's a picture or something.